From the Lean Enterprise Institute in Boston, this is the WLEI Podcast, where we share stories of people making the world better through lean thinking and practice. For more information about LEI, including how we can help you apply lean thinking, please visit lean.org.
Hello, I'm Lex Schroeder, and my guest today is Steve Spear. I'm going to invite Steve to introduce himself more fully in a moment, but many of our listeners may know him as a senior lecturer at MIT's Sloan School of Management, where Steve lectures on system dynamics and management science. Or you may know him from his paper Decoding the DNA of the Toyota Production System, or his books, The High Velocity Edge and Wiring the Winning Organization. Good morning, Steve. I have to say this is a real treat to speak with you about organizational learning. Before we do, I'm going to invite you to introduce yourself.
Oh yeah, thanks so much. I'm delighted to do anything with LEI. You guys have been pioneers in getting really good thinking out into practice, out into action. So any association is a real treat for me. Anyway, I'm Steve Spear, longtime fan of Lean. We'll get into why that is. Senior lecturer at the MIT Sloan School of Management, senior fellow at the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, founder of a software company called SeeToSolve, kind of based on what I wrote in one of my books, bringing software tools to make applying these ideas quicker, easier in action, and authors of two books. The most recent is called Wiring the Winning Organization, and the previous book was called The High Velocity Edge.
Awesome. To start, I'd love to speak about lean product and process development kind of right off the bat as we explore the larger theme of organizational learning. I know you're passionate about LPPD for short, and you've studied a ton of companies who have done this well or continue to do this well, not only Toyota. Can you share some examples of excellent companies and perhaps products that have come about thanks to exemplary product and process development systems? Any that come to mind?
Oh, absolutely. Look, when we talk about whether it's product, processes, services, it simply doesn't matter whether it's what we consider quote unquote, big air quotes around that, routine production and delivery, or, what everyone says, ooh, innovation. There's commonality across all those undertakings, right? And that's in order to accomplish anything, particularly things that are audacious, what we have to do is harness the intellectual horsepower of people distributed throughout the organization into collaboration and coordination, which is really meaningful and productive. Full stop on that. And when we start looking at organizations that have succeeded way outside the norms of their fields, any look we take will reveal senior leadership and leadership at all levels and all roles, hyper concerned about creating conditions in which it's much easier for people to solve hard technical problems for which there's great value to society, spending far less time solving the quote unquote system problems of, who am I? Where do I fit in? What do I do? What do I depend on? Who's dependent on me? And all that sort of thing. Anyway, that's a common theme, right? Creating really great conditions for people to solve really hard problems. Now, as far as examples, there's lots of them across many, many sectors. I'll list a few in a second. But what's so encouraging about that is that this is not, lean is just for production, or agile and DevOps is just for IT. No. Anytime we have people trying to work together towards doing audacious things, these ideas apply. So anyway, with some examples, since we did start with lean, obviously we've got to look at Toyota. 50-year leadership in one of the most hyper-competitive sectors in the world. I mean, you start thinking about, quote unquote, perfect competition. That would have us think that if you get leadership, it's just by chance, right? Random walk down Wall Street. And we have Toyota leading on first quality, then productivity, then time to market with new products, then time to market with new technology, then the ability to scale new technology to unparalleled levels. The hybrid system, Prius now across dozens and dozens of platforms and tens of millions of units sold. Obviously, when we take a look at Apple, which has been the standard setter in its industry, Samsung, which is setting standards in its own particular way in its industry, going back in the high velocity edge, we spent a lot of time talking about Toyota. Look, my research roots are there. I've been a 30-year and continuing student. I emphasize continuing student on Toyota. But we have examples there about the Navy's time from zero to underway on nuclear power, 7 years from initiating a program to having the USS Nautilus as the world's first nuclear-powered submarine. And in the time since then, perfect in terms of no injuries, no environmental damage due to reactor failure. Other examples in healthcare of doubling capacity, reducing overburden on staff, eliminating complications for patients. I mean, it's just, the examples are far and wide. The High Velocity Edge has a number of examples. The new book Wiring has dozens of examples, but there's plenty of examples to inspire those who want to be inspired and to dissuade those who want to be dismissive when they say, oh, well, that's not for me. It's like, yo, dude, it is for you because it's for everybody else.
It's good. Yeah. I love that. Thanks so much. I think it's just helpful to hear examples too, because it helps people sort of think concretely about these things and think about products they've heard of or admire.
That's right.
You've produced an incredible body of work and really helped people understand what makes Toyota and other organizations with excellent learning cultures so unique. I'm thinking about your paper that I've had to read a few times over the course of my career to really get it, Decoding the DNA of the Toyota Production System, among many other things you've written. I'm curious, did you set out to study this stuff, or what led you to study, write about, and teach management systems? Like, did it capture your attention early on, or did you fall into it? What made you stick with this line of study?
Yeah, I'd have to say most of the good things that have happened in my life I've fallen into. I don't offer that as an example. That said, I came of a professional age in the 1980s when Japanese companies were posing an existential threat to American firms. Once storied companies, RCA, U.S. Steel, Bethlehem Steel, General Motors, really suffering real decimation at the hands of the Japanese competitors. I was part of a very large cohort, of my generation, curious as to what was going on in Japan. I didn't know when I started this. I had no idea. It was all emergent discovery that fundamentally what was separating the Japanese leaders was their concern about harnessing the intellectual horsepower in their enterprises. When I started, I had worked on Wall Street, I'd worked in government. So I started off with, is there something about the financial structures that were being done? Or is there something about government policy that might explain this? Then I was at MIT as a graduate student, and I wandered my way into the engineering school. So I said, this must be something technological or production control algorithms. So I had an opportunity, again, just fell into it, of embedding on a Toyota team and learning firsthand from the masters. And this was Karate Kid, wax on, wax off. I was at a first-tier supplier, part of a team there, trying to stand it up so it was capable of supporting Toyota as a supplier, as opposed to whomever had been its customers before. And I came to appreciate even then that the hyper concern of the people who were my mentors was problem solving. And everything else was second and third hand to that, but it was fundamentally about problem solving. Mm-hmm. And what I've come to, like I said, I'm a continuing 30-year student of Toyota and its leaders, is that even for them, problem solving is a second order effect. It's people development is the first order effect, because there are so many problems that have to be solved everywhere all the time about everything. Mm-hmm. And unless you're developing everybody to be outstanding problem solvers, you just won't have enough of that capability.
Well said. Well said. And I'm always struck, we'll talk more about it later, kind of why is embracing problems so hard? It's very human, but I think once you make the switch, everything sort of changes. Anyway, what do you think business leaders and product leaders in software development can learn from lean product leaders who make hardware? I feel like for some reason I'm pretty obsessed with the hardware folks and the software folks talking more to each other. In your experience, do you see these leaders talking to each other enough? And if not, why do you think this is?
Right. So do they talk to each other enough? Probably not. One can speculate there are a lot of natural boundaries. They are in different roles in different industries. They came up through different personal and professional development pathways and pipelines. So they probably didn't by chance meet each other. Then they're separated by, certainly in some cases, they're separated geographically. The cliches of the industrial Midwest versus the tech sectors out in Silicon Valley or the biotech here in the Boston area. So there's that. And then they're separated by lexicon and semantics, right? Which in Wiring the Winning Organization, my co-author and I, Gene Kim, we talked to this, that there are all these, movements. You got your Lean Six Sigma, total quality, Agile, DevOps, it's on and on, the whole long list, safety culture, et cetera. And they all have their own language to describe. But as we started, we make this point very early in the book, is that what do they all have in common? All of them speak to at least one, sometimes two, sometimes three behaviors of the leaders. One, they have a way of making problem solving easier to do. And we put our own term on it. I guess we fall into the trap. We call it slowification. What we're really trying to say is that too often organizations spend too much time trying to get people to solve problems on the fly when they're using their fast thinking, their habits, their routines, their stimuli response kind of thing, when really they need to be in the modality of being self-reflective, self-corrective, generative, so on and so forth. And they just need to slow down even a little bit to get that part of the brain engaged. And so if you start looking across, so your question was, do they or don't they talk to each other? And I said, probably not enough. And why not? But should they? Absolutely, right? Because in terms of how do you create better conditions so that problem solving is easier, the commonality is people. And so there's an awful lot to be learned from each other. And then the second thing we talked about is simplification, which is if slowification is about making problem solving easier to do, simplification is about making the problems easier to solve. And there the issue is the limitation and the opportunity is the capacity of the human mind to solve hard problems. And so we talk about different techniques. We call it modularization, incrementalization. Without going into the details of those things, we see in manufacturing a lot of linearization. But we point out is that all of those can be applied and actually have been applied with great success across lots of different sectors to make the problems themselves easier to solve. And then the third, which also is not uncommon because what we're trying to do is create conditions for people's minds to be successfully engaged. We talk about this third mechanism called amplification. And the point there is to make little problems obvious early and often. So you have an opportunity to slowify, deal with them in a thoughtful, deliberative, reflective fashion before they have opportunity to become really big problems, which are at the cusp of creating a crisis.
Thank you so much. So I'm hearing that framework of slowification, simplification, amplification kind of cuts across hardware and software, and perhaps is a way for those communities to talk to each other, around these ideas. Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah, Lex, absolutely. And what we have found is in the years since the wiring book has been out, when we're talking to groups and say, look, as a leader, your job is to create conditions in which the people for whom you're responsible can solve problems quicker, faster, easier, better, safer than they have before. And that's a universal, right? Because no matter what situation you go into, you're going to find problems. And then we say, well, here's the thing. You can appreciate that, the slowification to make the problem solving easier. People say, yeah, I get that. The simplification, amplification, same thing. They get that. And we're finding those three terms have become so useful for people to say, oh, hold on. Did we amplify that problem adequately? Oh, maybe we should amplify it more. Is it triggering us to slowify? If not, we better slow down even more so we can be more deliberative, self-critical, experimental, experiential in discovering a problem and its solution. And always simplifying the situation so the problem is easier to solve. We're just finding people come back to this language all early and often. And
very, very helpful language.
It's both useful and gratifying.
That's excellent. So I want to stick with this common theme that cuts across so many companies and so many different kind of schools of thought, right? Or different methodologies for doing this work. Problem solving, as you say, it comes back to creating conditions for really good problem solving at all levels. And what do you think makes it easier for leaders to embrace this idea of a problem-solving culture? I've worked in organizations where it's totally embraced. I've worked in organizations where it's harder. What shifts leaders to be more open to embracing problems as a source of learning and innovation?
Yeah, fantastic question about making it easier to do this. So the behavior you see in these great organizations is leaders going to the point where problems might be experienced. In the lean community talks about the Gemba, the actual place of work. In healthcare, they talk about doing examinations. And other industries have other terms, but the basic commonality is get close to the time, the space, the location where symptoms are first presenting themselves that things aren't working well. And while the lean people, because with the heavy emphasis on production, talk about the Gemba as the place of work, on the innovation side, there's a lot of talk about, quote unquote, getting out of the building, embedding in the problem space. And Clay Christensen, who was a mentor, talked about finding the white space. What's the white space? He was talking about the white space is there's someone standing there who has a problem which has not yet been recognized. They, as a problem holder, have not yet been recognized. So this whole notion of getting close, and there's some great examples. We're talking Lean and Toyota, where the chief engineering role within Toyota for a new product starts with actually embedding in the problem space and becoming the avatar for the potential customer. Yeah. There's some fabulous examples of driving minivans 50,000 miles to discover what delights and disappoints in minivans before the design of the Sienna. Back in the day when Boeing was a huge amount of innovation, technological market process, inventing the 747, there was a role that became known as the technical maestro. And it turned out at first that sounds like the person who's just sort of the brainiac on science and technology. Think the characters on Big Bang Theory. But that wasn't the case. The technical maestro was the person who had a sense of what problems were presenting where in the organization that were not being well addressed, and then making the social connection between experts of different types so they could engage in the collaboration necessary to deal with that. So anyway, this go to the problem space, that's the commonality. The thing I would like to add is that as uncomfortable as that is, it's actually quite liberating.
Yeah.
Because too many of our leaders today have inherited management systems which were nonsensical and pathological when they were invented in the 1960s. And guess what? They still are nonsensical and pathological today in the 2020s. They didn't get it any better. The problem is those management systems were rooted in assumptions about the ability to micro-measure and micromanage. Again, there was no evidence, no theory. The math actually says it's actually impossible, but nevertheless, these people got themselves into positions of power and influence where they insisted if with just enough accounting, we could measure and schedule people to the nitty-gritty detail. And I think anyone listening to this who's been on the receiving end of metrics and dashboards and metrics of dashboards and dashboards of metrics will appreciate just how frustrating that is in terms of the sheer amount of time spent creating things which have absolutely no use at best, and which at worst misdirect the allocation of time and resources and attention away from where it's needed onto better things. All right, so now you start thinking about this Gemba approach though. What are you going to do? You're going to say, did I see a problem today? Yes or no? That's a very simple metric. Yes or no? Did I do something today to alleviate that burden? Yes or no? All right. If you have two metrics, both of which are binary, that's a whole lot better than metrics and dashboards.
Thank you so much for your candor. I'm glad you brought up Boeing as well. I just finished I think it was 2022, the documentary, The Case Against Boeing, which I thought was very thoughtful, illuminating, and fair. It talks about the two 737 MAX crashes that took place in October 2018 and March 2019 and led to the deaths of 346 people. It's a super lean documentary without ever using the word lean. There's a lot of talk about psychological safety, learning cultures, and creating an environment, again, where people can raise issues when they see them. And I thought, this is also an incredible film about leadership and the failures of leadership. So I'd love to ask, it's a big question, I know, but what kind of leadership do you think we need today? What do you hope to see from executives, product leaders, and people building these organizations of the future?
Yeah, so great question. And I won't say anything disparaging about Boeing. There's obviously the horrible, horrible tragedy that was experienced by the families of the crew members and passengers who perished on those flights. I would also say there's the huge tragedy by the Boeing engineers, technicians, machinists, mechanics, who go to work every day hoping to be part of this fantastic legacy that is Boeing Aerospace. And to go into work and have go to work thinking, wow, maybe today is my day to contribute to something as spectacular as a 747 and to go home at the end of the day knowing that perhaps, just maybe, they had a hand in that. Has to be devastating, no question. And so our sympathy has to go out to those folks. Now, in terms of how you get into such situations, again, I'll come back to these, toxic, pathological, nonsensical management systems that got cultivated in the 1960s. Is that balls like to roll downhill, right? To a point of lower potential energy. The thing about going and engaging, it takes some work. It takes the physical work of actually, getting out of the building and going to the problem space, whether the problem space is in a studio, it's in a factory, it's out in the field, with a problem holder. You don't even know who that person is. You have to actually literally find them. You have to first find them before you can even embed with them to understand what's affecting them. So that's hard work. There's also the hard work of engaging with them, not in a empathetic fashion. Understanding what's hurting them, not making judgments based on your own. And we've all been to the doctor, and there were those doctors and nurses who were so appreciative of, they seem to understand us and not just look at us and just go off of a checklist. So that's hard work that way. So we have the problem that it seems so much easier to ask people to report to us what's going on. That's the metrics and the dashboards, and then try to make decisions on that stuff. And the problem is, when we get into the modality of asking for metrics and dashboards of metrics and whatnot, we're losing the rich, nuanced, idiosyncratic, situational information that actually tells us the truth. And once we start getting into these metrics and these dashboards, we think we have precision, and perhaps we do, because we can get a lot of significant digits off of this stuff. But what's the problem? We may have precision, but we no longer have accuracy. We no longer have the truth. And so now we start acting with great conviction because we seem to have precision, but we're acting in very bad ways because we're acting against falsity. So anyway, what's the hard part about this is we have to cast off all that's, and I would use the term not lightly, indoctrinated on us. That if we could just measure with greater precision, we could have greater insight and consequently greater control. And like I said, for things as complex and nuanced and subtle and idiosyncratic and situational as many people trying to work collaboratively towards the common purpose of achieving audacious common goals, there's just no metrics. That maybe an approximation that'll point you in the direction of go look here, but it's not a substitute. It's just a pointer in the direction.
So what I'm hearing for kind of the leadership we need today is leaders who create the conditions for good problem solving at all levels, leaders who value accuracy, empathy, humility, leaders who can be, good listeners and patient and really observe what's going on. Anything you'd add to that list for key characteristics?
I wouldn't add it, Lex, but I'll amplify what you just said. Is you started off with leaders who value, and then you switched it over or expanded it to leaders who do. And fundamentally, that's what's required. Is that if a leader says, oh, it's very important to get out of the building and find the problem holder and the problem space, or the leader says, the Gemba is very important. It's very important for us to go and watch and observe and understand the overburden on our associates. But then they don't do that. They still ask for the metrics and reports. Then people know, well, I know where I should really be investing my time and energy. It's on the metrics and the dashboards, because that's what they're basing their own decision on. On the other hand, you get a leader who, when someone says, oh, where can I find Lex? Where can I find Jim? Where can I find Steve? It's like, oh, don't look for them in an office. They're not going to be there. Go look in the problem space. Well, people realize, well, to get with them, I got to get in the problem space. And that's why they are there. That's why they are there.
Thank you. So last question. I'm sort of obsessed with knowledge not getting lost, and I'm really excited about your new book. And so I have a chance to ask you, what are some key ideas about lean product and process development or anything else that you explore in your latest book that people might miss and would be wise to slow down? There's that theme of slowing down again and really try to absorb.
Yes, I appreciate that. So on the theme of slowification and the theme of having clarity, some better approximation of truth. I'll go back to Hyman Rickover, the admiral, who was the founder and the longtime steward of the Navy's the Navy's nuclear propulsion program. And the admiral was to have said, until you write it down, you can't claim to know it. Now, people who know his reputation will say, oh, I would never want to work for a guy like that. He was extraordinarily demanding. And there's lots of stories, both tragic and comic, about how demanding he was. By the way, people I know who've worked in that program and who worked for him, by and large, say it was the hardest thing they've ever done. Can't imagine doing anything else. Would never trade it for a moment. All right. But anyway, in terms of writing it down, it's not that he was insistent or our, mentors and role models at Toyota are insistent that every time you have a situation, you have to write a dissertation. It takes a long time. No one reads a dissertation. I can speak from experience. However, if you're going to do work, at least do a drawing.
Yeah.
Do something that captures your understanding of the reality. If precision is a matter, do a measured drawing because, and again, you see, I'm channeling my wife, an architect, for some of my analogies, but she has it all the time in practice. Where someone says, oh, I have an idea. Let's put this thing here. Let's put that thing there. And says, whoa. And she says, oh, we got to slow down. Let's draw it out because we've got to make sure whether we really have an understanding of reality. And also, once we draw it out, you have my understanding of reality. It may not be perfect. It may be quite flawed, but at least then you can critique that. Words, they just disappear. They just disappear into the air. So anyway, make a drawing, write a summary, make a list, do a diagram, a Venn diagram. For example, Gene and I think on like page 8 of the text, we got a Venn diagram. We say, look, our assertion is that all these different movements, Lean Six Sigma, whatever else, have commonality across these 3 mechanisms. So we did a Venn diagram. Are we right? Are we wrong? I don't know. We're sort of right. It's kind of truthy. Is it the actual truth? I doubt it. But at least we wrote something down so that you as reader can look at it and say, oh, that's what they mean. And here's I didn't realize that makes sense. And also, better call those guys because they got this wrong. So anyway, Lex, back to this, the admiral. Until you write it down, you can't claim to know. But the other part is, until you write it down, you don't know what you don't know. And the other thing is, until you write it down, it's really, really hard to collaborate with other people because you don't have something tangible for them to find flaw in.
Yeah. Thank you. And again, we're referencing Steve's latest book, Wiring the Winning Organization, for folks who want to grab that book. I really can't recommend Steve's work enough. Any final thoughts that you'd leave people with as, whether they're coming to this conversation, again, from Lean, Agile, DevOps, psychological safety, and the brilliant work of Amy Edmondson, wherever you're coming from, what are some, kind of anything you'd like to leave folks with as we exit?
Yes. So the request I'll make to listeners is, first of all, the thanks. Thanks for listening to this far into the recording. That I can actually make a request. I guess the first thing, it's not entirely selfish. On the theme of seeing problems early and often, so you can get better. So we'll provide some means for people to get samples of the new book, Wiring the Winning Organization, and also excerpts out of my previous book, The High Velocity Edge. So take a look at that stuff. I hope it's useful to you. But if you find something wrong with it or something unclear even, just let us know. So on the next go, we can get better at it. I think that's the first thing. And then the second thing is the stuff that does make sense. Give it a try. Maybe hypothetically sensical when you see it on the page, but until you start putting ideas into action, into practice, we really don't know. And I'd be delighted to find out from people what worked for them and also what didn't work and why not.
Can't think of a better note to end on. Thank you so much, Steve, for your time.
Yeah, Lex, thank you. Look, again, you're part of LEI, and LEI was way early trying to share with people better ways to not only create and deliver value into society, but create conditions in which when people went to work every day, they said, you know what, my day is going to be meaningful. Mm-hmm. And when they left, they could say, you know what, my day actually was meaningful. And that was a real response to an antidote to organizations of all types, manufacturing, of course, but also healthcare delivery, et cetera, where their ability to deliver value to society was not what it should be in terms of quality, safety, cost, availability, access, et cetera, And because of that, the same conditions that, the same internal conditions that led to those disappointments externally, it led to disappointing experiences when people came into work and then left at the end of the day, leaving with saying, oh man, I came here with such high hopes, and I'm leaving with fewer of those hopes fulfilled and actually some disappointment. And you guys have really been trying to shove against those conditions and create better ones. So I'm really appreciative of doing anything with LEI, because you've done so much for the rest of us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. Take care.
Absolutely. Thank you.